You've been searching for the best way to generate passive income in your life and heard that real estate is a great way to do it. But you're tired of all the so-called gurus who are all talk and no substance. Get ready to celebrate because Kevin Buck has spent 14 years successfully making it happen. This is the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. Now, here's Kevin Buck.
Hey guys, Kevin Buck here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. Our mission is to help you build and maintain massive amounts of cash flow through income-producing real estate investments. And our guest for this week's show is founder and CEO of AirBNB Automated, Sean Rocketich. Now, Sean is a serial entrepreneur and an accidental Airbnb host. After discovering the earning power of short-term rentals, Sean, within 3 years, built a $3 million per year real estate business with no debt or financing. Sean is now the host of the popular YouTube channel AirBNB Automated, where he's taught thousands of people for free how to realize their potential and build their own successful Airbnb-based business. Now, here's what you're going to learn in the interview with Sean today. You're going to learn how Sean's been able to build a 100-plus unit short-term rental portfolio without actually owning any of the real estate. You'll learn how to leverage rental arbitrage by leasing apartments in highly desirable locations and converting them to Airbnb rentals. You'll learn how to utilize an LLC to lease an apartment, thus eliminating the need to sign as a personal guarantor. In addition to that, you're going to learn how to use this LLC to provide leverage to circumvent the typical subletting restrictions found in most residential leases. You're going to learn how Airbnb is performing during the pandemic and what Sean's opinions are on the longevity of this business model. We're also going to discuss real-life case studies of recent deal that Sean's negotiated and much, much more. And so with that, guys, I'm super excited to get onto the show with Sean. But before we do, I just have a few quick housekeeping items. First announcement is that we just launched a new partnership program called Bring Kevin a Deal. This is where I will pay you as much as $200,000 for any mobile home park or parking lot that is referred to me that I end up purchasing. To learn more about this partnership opportunity and also to download my deal acquisition criteria guide, simply go to bringkevinadeal.com. Again, that's bringkevinadeal.com. Moving on here, guys, if you love what we're doing here at the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast, please take a moment, if you haven't done so already, and leave a rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. And also be sure to subscribe to the show so that you get notifications of when our newest and latest episodes roll out. Also, guys, I want to remind you of the free 30-minute phone call that I offer each and every Friday. This is where I open myself up to 30-minute time slots with you so that we can talk about everything and anything that your heart desires regarding real estate investing. To sign up for that free call with me, you can go to kevinbuck.com, pick a time and date that works for you. Be sure to also put some additional notes in there about what you'd like to discuss during our 30 minutes together, and I'll look forward to meeting you. And now, guys, without further ado, I'd like to get on to the part of the show that you've been waiting for, which is our interview with Sean Rocketich. So here we go. Alrighty, guys, it is my honor to introduce my guest for today's show, founder of AirBNB Automated, Sean Rocketich. Sean, how you doing today, buddy?
Hey, how's it going?
Doing good, man. Excited to have you here. Excited to spend some time with you, dive into your business. I know that you've built quite a successful foundation on the Airbnb platform, so very excited to dive into everything and anything related to making money with Airbnb. And so where I'd like to go with this, Sean, in the beginning of the show is for those folks that might not be familiar with you, don't know who you are or what it is you do, maybe take a few minutes to share a little bit of your background, ultimately how you got started, how you found your way into real estate, and then, really how you landed in the Airbnb space, if you would.
Sure. Well, I like to actually, first off, I like to say that Airbnb isn't really a real estate play. A lot of people disagree with me on that, but I think it's really kind of how you use it. Mm-hmm. But that's from my upbringing in business. This is not, I guess you could say I'm a serial business owner. I own a few small businesses, and my first business was in the newspaper industry. I basically sold hundreds of thousands of newspaper subscriptions, direct marketing. So I'd have sales staff in grocery stores. I would put them in like furnished housing, so almost like a corporate housing solution when I would relocate them from city to city. And that's really where this began, was in 2014, I relocated a sales manager from Detroit. And as part of his hiring package, I gave him 8 weeks of housing for free in a furnished high-rise apartment in Houston. But I was foolish enough to sign a year-long lease with only a plan for the 8 weeks he was living there. So that happened with two separate people that I relocated to Houston. And then after they both moved out, I had leases that I was paying for furnished apartments, and I had nothing to do with them. So I found Airbnb as my solution at the end of 2014, and they started not only paying for their rents, but were like doubling my rent money and net profit, which was killer. And that's where it really started. But it was just kind of a solution still for a couple of years. We just kept it going because it was cool. But when the Super Bowl hit in 2017 in Houston, that's when we really saw an opportunity. We're like, well, people pay a ton of money that weekend. So that's when we started picking up more apartments. And I picked up about 10 apartments right before the Super Bowl hit. And we had a huge weekend. We made like $15,000 in profit that weekend. And I'm like, this is it. Let's just keep going. So that's when I started the YouTube channel shortly after that, and spent about 3 years since. And we've gone from that 10 units to just over 100 units at the start of 2020.
That's exciting. And so just to get some clarity there on the 100 units, for the most part, are you just leasing these units and then subleasing them via the Airbnb platform, or do you actually own some of these physical properties?
I own $0 of property, so it's 100% rent.
Yeah,
and it's mostly apartment complexes.
Okay, fantastic. And I want to back up a little bit, and let's talk about that Super Bowl weekend in Houston where you went in. Was it 10 or 15 apartments that you ended up securing?
We went from 3 apartments to 10. So we had 10 by February.
Got it. So you went and leased 10 apartments overall, made a ton of money during Super Bowl weekend. And then, I'm assuming that obviously the long-term plan with those for the remainder of that lease, which probably was a year, was to just Airbnb them as well. And so what did the client base look like? Obviously for the weekend, it was a, Super Bowl crowd, folks that are just coming for the, that game, probably for a week at the most. And so what did you fill the remainder of that time up with? What type of folks were staying in those units, and what was the draw to those particular locations?
So the answer for these particular units was this was a high rise in downtown Houston, pretty much right between the medical center and all the oil buildings, right? So we very quickly started getting business travelers staying for 3 days to 14 days. We had people coming in for treatment, or they're flying in from out of the country to have a give birth for pregnancy at the medical center. There's students coming in for interviews or things like that for Rice University. And so there's a lot of, nuanced travel between business and the medical center and some academia. So that was that. We did pick up some properties also in the Galleria, which we thought was going to do well because it's like the 9th largest business district in the country. But we noticed that there was so much hotel presence that outside the Super Bowl, they didn't really perform well at a high price. So we started to learn that where you pick up your Airbnbs matters, because you're competing with hotels for business a lot of times. You're not really competing with other Airbnb hosts. But back in 2014, Airbnb was much more new as well. So the type of user was definitely different, and they were almost like purposefully wanting to stay in an Airbnb instead of a hotel because it was trendy and new and kind of a cool thing. There is still some aspect of that today. But now the difference today is people are trying to stay at an Airbnb because they don't want to stay in a hotel for other reasons like COVID. People are trying to avoid, the whole social distancing thing. So Airbnb, though, is becoming much more like a hotel brand anyway. So we're definitely competing with hotels a lot. And so that was one of the first lessons we learned, was where you pick up your Airbnbs matters for like long-term profitability.
Yeah, I mean, location is everything, right? I mean, no matter what type of real estate you're in, location is everything. You got to be in an area that is desirable and that people want to stay. And obviously the same relates to Airbnb. And, I definitely want to dig into the mechanics of that, of what the legalities look like for, and we could obviously start at those 10 units. Obviously, you signed a lease and then ultimately sublet them through the Airbnb platform. And so, but I don't want to get off track yet. I definitely want to cover that. So let's move forward here and talk about your business today. Would you say that the majority of your business targets what clientele base? Is it tourism driven? Is it longer term corporate stays? Who is your primary client today with your Airbnb portfolio that you hold?
So for the last few years, we've had about 30% of our business at minimum at any point in time be multi-month stays. And that's more of a pricing strategy thing or an occupancy strategy thing, because we could do a lot of 2-day, 3-day long stays, but we've actively chosen to price our listings to try to capture more monthly stays because then we need less staff. One of the differences between how I run my Airbnb business and how a lot of other bigger companies, like the biggest in the world is Sonder, as far as total units goes, as an Airbnb first business. Sonder hires third-party housekeepers, so they have like a high inflated like housekeeping costs, but they don't retain those staff. So if they don't need the staff, it's no skin off their back. We in-house everybody, even our housekeepers. Like,
wow.
So we've got teams of people who've been with us for like years now. And so because of that, in order to keep our total like wage bloat low, to keep our total number of staff lower, we go for more longer term guests because it just makes it easier to manage at scale. So about 30 to 50% are longer terms. And then city to city, it varies. Like in Dallas, we do get a lot of business travel. Houston's been like that too. Philadelphia is much more tourism driven. So anywhere that we have properties in Philadelphia, people are coming in because Philly's one of those tourist cities. Fort Worth, you get a lot of that too. People are coming in to go like to the stockyards or the rodeo or to do like typical Texas stuff. And you still do get a little bit of business travel, some PGA tour stuff. So definitely city to city, the type of demographic changes wildly. But right now, it's all regional. People from the United States traveling within the United States because, of course, COVID.
So you've got your staff's on payroll. You don't outsource it to a third party firm, what have you. And so is the majority of your portfolio, the 100 or so units that you currently have in your Airbnb portfolio, is it concentrated in one or two markets? I mean, I would think that it has to be somewhat close together if you've got staff on payroll that needs to go to each one of these units and turn it over every couple of days, every couple of weeks, couple of months, what have you. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. We try to build in clusters. Not just in the city, but we try to build clusters within a building or within a neighborhood. So, for example, let's say you are building a new, like multifamily, like you're building a high rise or something, or you're refurbishing a corporate building and making it residential. We would try to come to you ahead of time and say, hey, we'll take a whole floor. We'll pre-lease the floor before you even start construction. And that, of course, serves purposes for a builder. Maybe a builder wants to go get a loan, and our pre-lease will help that happen. But the trade-off is that if I can get 30 or 40 units on the same floor, our housekeepers are wildly more efficient if they only have to go door to door to clean instead of going from like building to building to clean. And so we try to cluster in a building. If we can't get enough units in any one building, we definitely do cluster within a neighborhood. So we'll like downtown Dallas, we're trying to pick up a lot more in downtown or Deep Ellum because it's on the same strip. We've got stuff on the 75 corridor, basically Richardson through Plano in Dallas. And we try to pick up properties all within the same cluster. And then we have housekeepers that are pretty much like a lead housekeeper for that neighborhood, and they know everything about the buildings, and they help with quality control. In Philadelphia, getting around in a car is impossible, so we have to cluster. There's no way that one housekeeper can go from one neighborhood to another on public transportation. So that definitely in our business model, planning for the build, like to get 20 units in one area is vital. Yeah,
no, very interesting. I actually interviewed a gentleman, I can't recall his name right off the bat. He's a developer in Dallas, and he's currently developing an iconic building in downtown Dallas where Sonder basically pre-leased the entire building. I forget how many stories it is. I mean, it's a A plus class, very high end apartment facility with with retail on the bottom floor, but Sonder pre-leased the entirety of that unit. I think it was 300 plus units. Which is obviously that's a completely different level. As you mentioned, Sonder is the largest in the space.
I would check if they followed through on the. So I would check.
Yeah, it was only about 4 or 5 months ago, and so they were still in the middle of construction. Yeah, right. Now, given the current environment, that was pre-COVID, right? And and I don't know, I can't recall how far away they were from actually breaking or not breaking ground, but actually completion of the project and getting the CO. But yeah, you're right. Yeah, who knows where it stands today, especially given our current state of affairs.
There are many companies that do what I do that they kind of grew too fast on investor money, and they were not profitable before COVID hit. And so because they were not profitable when COVID hit, they definitely weren't profitable after, and they just closed up shop. Like Stay Alfred abandoned all of their leases. There's other companies like Domio, Vacasa, Lyric. A lot of them are like downsizing or quitting altogether. So I'm in the middle of a negotiation with a big property owner group, and they had a couple of these companies pull out on them. And so we're actually trying to like take the space that they vacated like immediately and try to like turn over fast for them. So it's kind of one of our value propositions as a rental arbitrage partner is that if another company fails, we can come in right away and take the property. And there's like almost no real loss of efficiency there.
Well, let's talk about that. Obviously, times are really crazy right now. The entire world for the most part is in a tailspin, some areas greater than others. People aren't traveling as much, whether it be work or pleasure. Various cities throughout the U.S. are still in different stages of lockdown. and gosh, even most other countries at this point won't allow those from the U.S., across the border into their countries. And so the question I have is like, during this pandemic, as we sit today, as we record this, can you still make a fortune using Airbnb without owning any property? I mean, is that a possibility still?
You'd be surprised, actually, that there's more travel now than expected, like more travel than if COVID never happened, Airbnb would be doing less business today than they are right now. So Airbnb is actually doing more business. And it's probably for a few different reasons, and I'm not privy to all of them, but I think there's a little overcorrection because people have been so pent up in their own homes that they want to go somewhere else. So people are booking lots of staycations. There's people who let's say, for example, you're working from home, but you still have to go to another city in case you're needed. There's a lot of industries like that. For example, construction or medical, you still have to go to another city to work. But if those companies abandoned their offices, then you're at your hotel a lot more. And so people, instead of staying in a hotel so they don't get cabin fever, they're booking something with more square footage at the same price, which is like an apartment in your house. And so I believe Airbnb's got an uptick because people just need out. And then also functionally for business, it's just a better solution now that offices are no longer a thing.
Yeah. When you say an uptick, I mean, compared to the same time, last year, 2019 to 2020, again, given the current state of affairs, when we're recording this in the beginning of August, first week of August. And so an uptick in comparison to last year, or just an uptick as it relates to the beginning of COVID?
So an uptick compared to last year, an uptick compared to leveling off on a V-shaped correction. So basically there was amount of business. COVID happened April 5th and 6th were the worst 2 days, but then a V-shape corrected all the way through May into June. And in June, the top of the V-shape was higher than the beginning of the V-shape in February. So there's the business has grown since pre-COVID.
Yeah. We obviously know that the Airbnb took a massive hit, right? I mean, it was, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Airbnb still was not a profitable model, right? They're still kind of in the stages of becoming profitable. Am I correct with that, or is that an inaccurate statement?
It's partially accurate, depending on when you start measuring. From the beginning, they were profitable until last year.
Okay,
last year was their first unprofitable year.
Do you feel that Airbnb as a company can survive through this pandemic? And this is worldwide, right? Because Airbnb has got a worldwide platform. But can Airbnb as a whole survive? Again, this is under the assumption. I mean, are you based in Texas or are you based in Pennsylvania?
I'm based in Dallas.
Okay, so Texas has been a lot more lenient, just like Florida, where we're based, right? So I feel like you probably have been experiencing this pandemic very similar to how we have in Florida, and it's not nearly as restrictive as a lot of other states throughout the U.S., right? I mean, it's probably been very lax in comparison to, especially if you want to talk about New England states and you get up in New York or Chicago, what have you, and then out west. And so, generally speaking, Airbnb as a company, do you think they can survive the long term worldwide as we work our way through this pandemic, assuming that it's going to take the remainder of the year to get some type of normalcy? Airbnb has probably gotten through the bulk of the COVID problem. They did some fundraising. They raised a couple $2 billion after the whole COVID thing. And what they did was pretty genius. A lot of hosts aren't happy about it. I'll just tell you that because, hosts were forced to give all their guests 100% refunds with no questions. Yeah. But Airbnb chose to do that because hosts are more sticky. Hosts will stay on the platform because everyone's making the money. If you made a guest upset, they'll never come back to the platform. They'll just book at the Hilton. So they basically gave guests a bunch of refunds. Then they made a pitch deck to investors that said because they did that, they have better loyalty and a better brand than their bigger competitors like Marriott. And so they went and they raised money on the premise that they're more sticky with customers because of what they did. So their first round of raising funds wasn't so good. Their percentage rate was kind of trash, but their next $1 billion that they raised was pretty good. So they have plenty of cash now. And because of the V-shaped correction, instead of it being a U-shape, they're getting way more money than they expected to get in June or July. So they raised money under the pretense that they could be completely gutted through September or October. And that's not the case. In many parts of the modern world, like Europe and the United States and South America, not all of South America, I'll take that back, but like Mexico and stuff, Airbnb's largely bounced back. So
There are parts of the world that are still like locked down to international travel and stuff, but Airbnb's largely recovered, and they're transaction based. So basically they get a percentage of the business done on the platform. It costs them really no money to transact that business. Their management costs are really their staff, right? Their staff and their legal team. And so they did downsize. They laid off a ton of people. I used to have a business rep that would like help me like manage my 100 listings, and they terminated all the business reps for the company. So they did do a lot of layoffs and raise a lot of money. So they're going to survive. Airbnb definitely will be around. They did. I think they did what they had to do.
Very interesting. So I know that your business model does not consist of actually owning the real estate. And so, but I do want to talk about that side of it. My first thoughts as we entered into this pandemic, really middle March, not so much. And then, we get into April, we realize that it's real. It's as real gets as far as, the world coming to a standstill. And it's April and May were just rough. And all I could think about outside of my family being safe and friends being safe and just, really hopefully finding a path through this sticky mess, but is, vacation rentals. I mean, coming into the spring and summer months and pretty much every prime location across the country, those small time investors that own one or two Airbnb rentals, they've got debt on them. This is their little side hustle, their path to retirement in, 20, 25 years, and they pay it off, what have you. Those individuals suffering, because they're relying on that income to basically pay their debt, and they don't necessarily make enough in their W-2 to support, two additional rental properties that have no income streams coming in. What are your thoughts about the fallout of those individuals, if you want to classify them as their own group set? Do you think there's going to be some fallout in the vacation rental space or Airbnb space because of them?
State to state, the answer will vary. I know Florida particularly had it bad because of the travel, like the Airbnb restrictions that got put. So a lot of hosts in my Facebook group, a lot of them from Florida are like, what do we do? So we powwowed on like strategies to get monthly guests. And I still have students of mine from my course that are picking up properties like 5-bedroom houses on the water in Florida right now, but negotiating real solid deals because those owners are worried about not collecting rents because people aren't going to be moving in, and the vacation rental market's like deflated in Florida because of short-term rental restrictions. So there are Airbnb operators that are making profit there. But in a lot of states like Texas, the owners who have vacation rentals or near New York, like the Poconos Mountains and stuff like that, people are just crushing it because people want out of the city. So I would say in the majority of cases, vacation homes are doing better than normal because of that dynamic. I just talked to a host in Houston. He's like, we're doing the best numbers we've ever done in our vacation homes ever.
So then probably the ones that are suffering are the ones that are in the more densely populated or urban areas. And so like the folks that have the Airbnbs maybe in a downtown Chicago, downtown New York, or any other major metropolitan area within urban core, those are the ones that are probably suffering because people aren't really clamoring to rush to a densely populated area at this point in time.
That's right. Yeah. So where we got killed in April and May, April was like really bad for us. We actually lost money in April, was in our inner city stuff. And Philadelphia did like an Airbnb, and so we couldn't operate our Airbnbs until like June. That was rough. So we had to renegotiate our lease terms with a lot of our landlords. But all this suburban stuff did really good. The only people with vacation homes that had any trouble at all was Florida, because Florida had this really stupid restriction. But people got through it. You just have to be adaptive. Like COVID hit everybody in different ways. So I don't think any industry aside from like online shopping really got crushed.
Not to be selfish and not to make a joke out of it, I was kind of hoping if you could pick a time of the year for this to happen, it would have happened during the winter, because I really want to buy a mountain home in Colorado. And obviously the summer rates out there aren't nearly what they are in the winter out there when you get near the ski resorts and what have you. But it's selfishly in my mind, I'm like, well, it'd be nice to be able to go buy a home at half the price out in Colorado, but pick it up from an Airbnb, a business model that might have been flawed during the winter months and didn't get the rents they were hoping. But
yeah, if you bought a year before COVID, you buy before COVID, because now after COVID hit, people who can work remote want to move somewhere else that they like. I feel like there's going to be an uptick in home purchases in beautiful destinations that are still functional near airports. So Colorado's perfect. You're still close to the Denver airport, but you can be in some beautiful mountain area and work from your computer at home. I think more people are going to move from like San Francisco to Denver. You know what I mean?
I agree.
Outside of Denver. like,
Yep.
Vail or something. And so you might as well expect that home prices in those areas are going to skyrocket.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And so I want to get back. Let's get back to the mechanics. I want to talk to your business model, which is not owning the real estate. Again, this show is predominantly about actually owning investment real estate. However, in your model, you're using the real estate as the vehicle to create cash flow, right? And so it's you could call it not a real estate play, but it kind of is. You just happen not to own the real estate, so whatever. It's one and the same. Yeah. You can look at it from many different angles. So, how does one that has little to no money and possibly no credit get started actually making money with Airbnb? So I kind of want to just go to the very baseline. Let's talk to the folks that are just getting started, that might not have money to go buy a house or buy a rental property. This might be a segue or entrance into building a cash flow portfolio without having to come out of pocket with, 20, 50, 100 grand, what have you. And so again, how does one make money that has no money and no credit in the Airbnb space?
So step one is you form an LLC. I learned this little trick because I was actually evicted in 2009. I was in the sales world and it just didn't work out, and I got evicted because I didn't make enough money in my place. So 2009, I got evicted. I used an LLC to rent my first apartment in 2012, and that was super, super helpful. I did that personally for me, but that LLC became the LLC that I started renting my Airbnbs through later. Right. And like in 2014, 15, I was picking them all up through my LLC because my eviction was still on my record from 2009. So that's step one, LLC.
Well, let's back up a little. I want to make sure that I mean, everyone that's listening, I'm sure they know what an LLC is, but how does one use it to your benefit to go lease an apartment? I mean, most apartments I know would want a personal guarantee. They would want to know what your personal credit is. So how can you get around that just by showing them that you have an LLC? And if you just formed it, it doesn't really have its own, track record or history or even credit at that point in time. So how do you get around that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I formed my LLC, a leasing office at an apartment complex said, we can't approve you, but if you go form an LLC, we can approve that LLC right now. So the leasing office of a building told me that.
Wow.
So the dynamic here, there are commissions at play. Real estate agents, the realtors that represent landlords, leasing agents that work for property management companies, they make money if you sign leases. There's usually an incentive. So these guys are like motivated to do the deal. So smaller management companies will bend their rules to attain occupancy. So especially right now with B-class, C-class properties are the ones that suffer the most from non-payment of rent right now. So you can have a new LLC and you can have like an absence of proof of cash flow. You could just get your EIN number from the IRS. You can get a Dun and Bradstreet number, and you can have that stuff, like you can have that all fresh. And you maybe just made your bank account at like Chase or Bank of America and put like $1,000 in it. And that may be all you have. And these businesses will just screen your LLC. And some of these screenings are just looking for an absence of trouble with a business. They're not looking to see if your business actually is good enough. They're just looking to make sure your business hasn't like screwed up royally in the past. So smaller companies will approve an LLC rather quickly. And I mean, it is a mixed bag. So as your LLC gets older, we could talk about this for a long time, like how to make an LLC like mature. You can have an LLC for 2 years and you can build trade lines. We can talk about all that. And you can talk about cash coming in and out of your bank account and all the good stuff. But that just means you'll be able to get approved for more deals along the way. But your brand new LLC can still get approved today for a deal. It happened to me. And I still find buildings like the one I'm sitting in right now, I actually live in order to get approved here, they want all this stuff personally. But the moment we applied, like me and my best friend, we actually moved into the same building. The application process was completely different because I used my LLC. They just almost automatically approved me. Their LLC screening is like nil, but their personal credit screening was like Fort Knox. So
I don't think most leasing companies don't have the it's a very different model or structure as far as the credit screening process to screen an LLC, and most aren't set up to even do that. So I know we own a property management company, so it's it's a little harder to dig into an LLC than it might be a personal credit score or social security number tied to an individual.
Yeah. And until something terribly wrong goes bad nationwide, there's not going to be like some comprehensive thing until there's an incentive to create it. So right now, they're letting LLCs through because there's really no reason to be scared of them. They tend to work out generally. And until something goes wrong, it's just going to be that way. So LLCs provide you other benefits too, because of course you're sheltering yourself against judgment. You're now not technically subletting because an LLC is not a person. So if an LLC is the one that signs a lease, they just declare the occupant in the lease, and you can change out the occupant while still maintaining the leaseholder. So it's not subletting because you're not actually like daisy chaining leases under each other. You're just switching out who you're declaring is living there. And that initially was like the big hack in 2014 and 15 was, according to like Texas lease law, there was nothing that said you couldn't list on Airbnb. There's nothing that said you couldn't do short-term rentals. The only thing was there's a no subletting clause. But by being an LLC, you bypass that by default. And so there's kind of this golden era for a couple of years until Airbnb got popular, where you didn't even have to negotiate your deals. You'd have to be nice to your landlord. You couldn't like let people throw ragers because of course they'd still try to kick you out. But if you ran a good business, you didn't even have to negotiate as an LLC. You just say, hey, I'm an LLC. I'm going to get a corporate lease. And then you could operate, and legally there's nothing they could do. So now that's changed. A lot of leases have anti-Airbnb language. So now you have to convince the landlords to like change their lease terms. So you really do have to talk about your business model at length with landlords now to get them to sign on the line. Gotcha. So it's more a front-loaded conversation at that point in time. Otherwise, just don't do it and move on to the next. Okay. So that's the, we kind of talked about the no credit that, the LLC and that model gets around it. But how about the no money part? Obviously any lease, they're going to want some type of security deposit. You're going to have a cost to furnish a unit. And so talk to me about how one could truly get started. Maybe it's not no money, it's little money, but let's talk about what that little money really means, what it equates to. So when you try to get we call it rental arbitrage, which is where you rent an apartment, furnish it, and then lease it out for the period of your lease term and try to make a profit over time, like over your monthly rent. There's a few numbers that really matter to get in the deal, and lowering your upfront cost is what it's always about. It doesn't matter if you have money or not. Every single deal, you want to put in as little as possible on the front end, because that means your cash on cash return is insane, right? So example of like a home run deal that I worked out like one of my very first deals, the building was in the middle of what's called a lease up, right? They just did construction. They have 10%, 20% occupancy, and their goal is to fill up in 6 or 9 months, right? To get over 85% in 9 months. So this building is giving out crazy specials for people to lease, and they're giving away 2 or 2.5 months of rent for free up front if you lease soon. So with that type of the real estate negotiation, you go to a building and say, hi, I will take 5 apartments from you today, and I'll take the 2.5 months of rent up front, no application fee, no deposit. They just like waive everything. You may have to pay the first prorated month of rent or something like that. So you pay like 10 days of rent to get in on these deals, and the next 2.5 months is free. Well, on a $1,500 a month lease, you just spent $500 and maybe 1 application fee. So you spent $500 per unit, and then you just have to buy the furniture. And so with that logic, if you have the credit, you could finance your furniture. Otherwise, you can just go out and buy it. You can go thrifting to get furniture initially. If you really are scrapping to start this business with very little money, there are ways to get decent furniture on the super cheap. But eventually, of course, you're going to reinvest all the profits that you're making from your Airbnb into, buying better, more sustainable long-term furniture in the end. But total cost to get into a unit, if you can get that front end lease concession where you don't have to pay right away, you're just buying the furniture. And that's really your only cost to get in, plus, say that $500, in a prorated month of rent. So I commonly will get into a studio apartment or a 1-bedroom apartment for under $5,000 total, including all the furniture, staging costs, and everything. Now, if you get your 2 months free right after that, and you're making, let's say you're just making $3,000 a month on your apartment, you just got $6,000 of cash in your first 2 months. You spent $5,000 to get in, and your third month of rent, the first month of rent you're paying for is like $1,500. Well, you've just gotten all but $500 of your money back coming into month 3. So going into month 4, you'll actually be profitable even after you pay your rent. So you can get your money back in like 4 months if you get a good upfront lease concession. Yeah. And you'll just need $5,000-ish per studio to make it happen, unless you're like really thrifty and you can do it for cheaper. My first one I did for like $3,300.
Yeah, 2014 though is a very different time than today. I mean, I'm not one to ever say like you can't do that. That's not possible today. Anything's possible. But do you, in a brand new lease up in a strong market, those concessions just aren't happening. Not at this point. I don't think that we're overbuilt. 14 was we're still slowly pulling out of the last recession. And then the last like couple of years have just been on fire, especially in the multifamily space. Is it realistic to think one could truly get in with, those types of concessions today in a strong market, or would it be very much an anomaly?
So the building I live in here, they gave me 2 months free up front. Mm-hmm. We picked up 6 units at another building owned by the same company down the street. They gave us the second and third month free, so we just had to pay that first prorated month of rent.
And that's in Dallas or Fort Worth?
That's in Dallas.
Okay.
In Fort Worth, we just picked up a building where we got the first month free, not 2 months, but the first month free. I just picked up 2 buildings in Philadelphia. Actually, one is a run of 4 townhomes and one is a 7-unit apartment complex. Both of those one gave me the first 8 weeks free. The other gave me the first 6 weeks free.
Fair enough. You proved me wrong. Fair enough.
It's all a negotiation. It's a sale. You have to.
I appreciate
the value.
No, I appreciate that. One other question I had there related to, and I'll use the example of the 5 units. So 2014, the 5 units you picked up all at once. Are they still not doing like an income verification? I mean, as far as like, can you actually, even though you got the LLC, but like, can you actually afford? Do you have the income? The cash flow on a monthly basis to actually pay these leases? Are they not looking at you personally for that, or your business per se?
Some do, some don't. One building, the most strict deal I've ever done, a guy wanted a year P&L from me, right? He wanted our P&L for 4 units. The 5 units we picked up in Fort Worth, they gave me a month for free. I don't even remember us applying. I don't remember us even filling out an application. They just gave us the units. It was wild.
That's funny.
It's so crazy. So building the building the results are completely different, and that's kind of half the point. I recommend that people start with single-family homeowners, because since you're refining your negotiation technique with this rental arbitrage, is definitely it's basically getting a person to give you a lease for as long as possible. Try to get a 3-year long lease from somebody, because that way you can profit for 3 years. Try to get a good deal on the front end and get permission to run your business model, and then ride that out for 3 years, profit as much as possible, and then go for the lease renewal if they'll give you a lease renewal. That's pretty much the whole thing. It's just it's a machine to get a lease and then profit on that lease. And so starting with single family homeowners, you get way more opportunities to negotiate one building at a time. I'm sure that a lot of people would be completely intimidated to walk into a 300 unit high rise and try to talk to the property manager about renting a floor as their first deal. That's not how I would recommend anybody start. You kind of need shooting practice. So, and what's wild is even with single family homeowners, there are logical ways to get months of rent for free. So one deal I just did in Philadelphia, there's a landlord that I said, hey, I'd like, a month of rent for free, on this property. They lowered their rent from $2,400 down to $2,100 because they couldn't get a tenant for 2 months. So I said, hey, tell you what, if you give me the first 6 weeks of rent for free, I'll give you an extra $40 per month of rent. How's that? And they said, no. I'm like, okay, fine. I'll take the deal, but I'll start the deal in 4 weeks. And they're like, okay, that sounds good. I'm like, how about I just take the deal right now, starting today, and I'll give you a little extra rent per month if you let me take possession today, but start paying you rent in 4 weeks. And then they're like, no. I'm like, wait, hold on, let me do the math for you again. Let me walk you through this. And I had to walk them through by hand the fact that if I started my lease in a month for $2,100 a month, they would get $2,100 a month for like 2 years, starting a month from now. But if they gave me possession today, they would start getting $2,140 per month, starting a month from now. And they didn't understand that concept of like having an empty home, like was part of their problem. Like having another month of no rent is another month of no rent. So they finally understood that me taking possession today and paying them a slightly higher premium per month was actually in their benefit at the end of the lease term. So
that's interesting.
Landlords aren't as smart all the time, so you kind of have to do it in cran. But you can still get free rent from landlords using that whole concept of delayed possession. It works.
Very interesting. Last question before we move on to the closing of the show here would be, sure. Is the long-term strategy, I guess I'm more speaking to you, not necessarily someone that's just getting started that has very little money that needs to leverage every dollar they have and might not be able to buy a property, but is your long-term strategy to actually own some of these units? Maybe not the units that you're currently leasing, but own your own Airbnb units, own your own apartment complex so that you can Airbnb a portion or all of them, what have you. And, some of the big benefits you're kind of missing out on, just speaking to the tax benefits, depreciation of actually owning the property versus just leasing it. And so many other benefits along with that, but just would love to hear your perspective on actually owning the property.
I would use Airbnb to audition a building potentially. For example, there's a building in Philadelphia that I Airbnb'd in, and the owner is going through foreclosure now, like a private money foreclosure. Mm-hmm. As soon as I found that out, I immediately started considering buying that building because I knew the numbers, right? Yeah. So doing an Airbnb could be a great way to build up the cash flow to be able to buy a property, and then you look for the properties that just do the best. And now you know that that building's good for you, and you don't have to be some ace at cap rates and all this extra fancy stuff. Because you know that if your model succeeds in this building, you can just buy it and scale it up. And so that's where I would purchase. Is at the moment that I can't grow any faster, like I can't take 100 doors at a time. At some point, there's like that growth rate slows down. Then all that extra cash can move into equity, and we would use that kind of like format of auditioning and building.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an intriguing model because, you'd still be buying it on the existing cash flow per the owner, right? Like whatever their monthly rates are, it's $1,500 a month, but yet you're yielding a 30% premium doing the Airbnb model. That's not reflected in their P&L. And so, I get that. That actually makes sense. That'd be
and then if you think about it, if you're actually yielding a 250% premium, not a 30%, right? When you Airbnb that place, the cash jacks up like big time.
Well, your expenses jack up too, right? I guess it's, but you still have a premium doing the Airbnb model. You've got a little bit more moving parts. You've got, some more, maintenance and expense associated with turning units, what have you. But still, I get it. Now that makes sense. That could be a brilliant strategy for folks. So, those that are listening, that could be a great way to actually, get into actually owning a investment property, at a very fair price and actually understanding how it's going to perform before you actually commit to buying it. So, in any event, Sean, this has been a lot of fun, but I really appreciate you coming to the show. And I like to enter into what we call the golden nugget segment. And this is where we're going to, work to wrap things up here for the day. What I'd like to ask of you is, you've shared a lot of great information, lots of golden nuggets already here on the show. But if you had one final golden nugget of advice or wisdom that you could leave with our listeners today that might inspire and motivate them as they progress in their own real estate investing or Airbnb career, what would that one last golden nugget be?
Everything is a business, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of people get into whatever endeavor, investing, business, Airbnb, buying property, becoming a landlord with this kind of like a narrow scope of mind. Like this is just one way that I'm going to make money. I'm going to like collect a check. I've noticed that in my growth in business, Airbnb, if you want to call it real estate, that there are many aspects of running a business. And so self-education is probably the most important thing you could ever do. Like accounting is one aspect of buying a deal, but human resource management in our world, like hiring housekeepers, became something that I realized was super important. And then marketing and sales, like negotiating our leases. And if you're great at sales, you can negotiate terms on buying a property too, just the same. So everything that you do is more than just what it appears on the surface. There's probably about 7 different aspects of business that you should become acquainted with: operations, human resources, accounting, sales, etc. And by continuing to dive deep into those topics, you'll become better at everything, including real estate. Yeah. Everything is a full business.
I agree with you, but that's great advice. And Sean, for those folks that want to learn more about you and what you got going on, what's the best place to find you?
Here on YouTube. I'm assuming that this would be a YouTube too, but YouTube channel, AirBNB Automated. It's like 300 something plus videos on how to build an Airbnb business. And we have a playlist that's kind of like a course that's got like a little over 100 videos on that course. That's more like in chronological order from start to finish. Like here's how you build a whole business. Okay. We have that for free. And then once you're a host, or if you're about to be a host, we have a Facebook group called the Hosts of Airbnb Automated, and people can join and see what all the other hosts around the world are doing.
Awesome. Good deal. Guys, I'll be sure to put that in the show notes as well. And so, Sean, that's all we have, my friend. I appreciate you joining us here. It's been a lot of fun. Cool.
I appreciate it. Thanks for giving me something to do. It's been kind of quiet here since COVID, so thanks for coming to visit.
Yeah. Well, guys, that's all we have for this week's show. So until we meet again next week, this is your host, Kevin Bupp, wishing you huge success. You guys take care.
Congratulations! Now you've got more of the best tricks of the trade in building massive amounts of passive income from real estate. For more amazing resources, visit realestateinvestingforcashflow.com. We'll see you next Monday morning.